Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call to order the July 24th, 2018 meeting of the Methacton School District Board of Directors. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
By way of announcements, the public is hereby advised of the audio and video recording of this meeting for the purposes of rebroadcasting. Clarification, there was an executive session of the board held on July 16th, 2018 at the Farina Administration Building for the purposes of discussing a matter of personnel involving the annual evaluation of performance of the superintendent. There was an executive session of the board held prior to this meeting on July 24th, 2018 in the high school for the purpose of discussing a matter of personnel involving a separation and release agreement with a professional employee. By way of attendance, we have all board members present this evening. Recognition of guests and scheduled speakers. Dr. Zerbe.
Thank you, Ms. Aubrey Larson-East. This evening we have two presentations. The first one, we have M Awards for the spring sports. We have Dr. Spivak here to help us recognize some of our finest athletes in the district. Dr. Spivak.
First, we'd like to thank Dr. Zerbe and the school board for allowing us to recognize our student athletes tonight for spring sports championships. Our spring sports champions typically receive an M Award, and that's what they will be receiving tonight. We had another exciting spring sports season in 2018, highlighted by two team championships. Girls track and field won a conference championship, and boys tennis won a conference championship, and they are here tonight to receive those M Awards. There will be a large number of those athletes missing tonight, including two of the head coaches are missing as well, but they are aware of tonight and certainly appreciate the recognition. First, our PAC boys tennis champions. Congratulations to head coach Jill Walker. She got married this summer and is currently traveling, but again, she's aware tonight and super excited for the boys to be recognized. Assistant coach Valerie Danzy was kind enough to be here tonight to recognize the team. And the entire program, congrats on a great season. I would like to now call up Coach Danzy to speak about their amazing season and read out the names of the student athletes who will be receiving M Awards tonight to commemorate their conference championship.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. We had quite an exciting season. Our boys were so talented. They gave it their all. They came out and practiced, and I don't know if everyone recalls what kind of spring we had. We had such bad weather. We had snow, we had freezing temperatures, rain, but they came out, and that's why they were so successful. Our boys became tri-champs this year. The other two schools were Phoenixville and Springford. They were so competitive with these teams, and throughout the season, I must say there were two schools that our boys beat, Wissahickon and Phoenixville. Wissahickon is a school, if everyone will know, that all their athletic teams are just one to beat. If you say that you can beat that school, you did well. And our boys did. And it came down to under the wire. We had our doubles champs. We had Aaron and Socket. And they were the deciding factor of that win. Thank you, Aaron and Socket, for your wonderful play that day. Overall, our team finished 17-4, including districts. In addition, we did have our boys double champs for Pac-10. Tonight, I would like to thank and congratulate Harsha Sathanam and Krishna Suraj for the amazing accomplishment in winning the doubles championship. They won in straight sets. They didn't drop a set in that final. Congratulations. So basically, we have most of our players here. So I would like to introduce our players and hand out the M Awards to them. Some that aren't in attendance are Matthew Chan. You want to hand them out? Krishna Paluta, Jonathan Rue, Elijah Smith, Kaushik Surnath, Jeremy Wang, and I believe Adam Zhang. This evening, we do have with us Amir Contractor. Amir? Saket Gohali. Harsha Sethanam. Krishna Sharash. And Aaron Zhang. As mentioned, our doubles champions were Krishna and Harsha. We'd also like to give them an outstanding award, achievement award for that also. So we can. Thank you, guys. Yes, thank you.
And congratulations again to our coaching staff and to our student athletes on a boys tennis championship, well deserved. The next team that we would like to recognize is our girls track and field champions from 2018. A congrats to head coach Rob Ronzano, who's not able to make it tonight. His assistant coaches are here, Coach McLaughlin, Coach Freeman, and Coach Mann. And I welcome them to the podium to recognize their championship season.
So I was given the job of trying to give you a summary of what occurred. Now think about this. I would like to thank you guys for having us here. But if you're a young lady in high school, would you rather have a free Tuesday night, or would you rather hang out with us three old guys? So the recognition is well deserved by them. Just apologize that we don't have more kids here. Briefly, what was kind of unique about this group is the track program was actually in a little bit, the girls' track program was actually in a little bit of upheaval in that the freshmen were going to be introduced to a brand new coach who they may or may not have heard about. The sophomores were going to have their second coach in 2 years. The juniors were going to have their third coach in 3 years. And the seniors were going to try to revisit the magic of maybe what the returning head coach was going to try to put together with us two older coaches. And we understood that they had talent, and they exhibited that talent. But there is one thing that I would like to mention real briefly, and that is in track, there's an unbelievable process of trying to take the best athlete and put them in the position to score the most points for your team. So it's an individual sport. You're out there by yourself, but you're trying to amass enough points to beat another team. Our head coach, Rob Ronzano, does that better than anyone in the pack. He has a passion about it. He's got a drive. He's also a little younger than Coach Freeman and myself. A lot younger.
Yeah, so he probably has more stamina. But we actually went into the season not quite knowing if we had enough talent, but Rob with his dedication, Rob with his drive, Rob with his ability to move, I really, really think it was
He plays three-dimensional chess with the team members, and he's given everybody else checkers. And so we won, which we hadn't won since he had left. And so I think a lion's share should go to Rob, and unfortunately, he's not here tonight. But who is here is possibly our most favorite athlete. I'm going to turn it over to Coach Freeman because he told me that I was going to be 50 seconds too long.
And it was 50 seconds too long. So, as Coach Mann said, it's difficult with the students getting here during the summertime. We have a long list of athletes that contribute to the championship, and it was truly a team championship, not one or two or three athletes that dominated, but this whole list contributed to the championship, and that's what made it so special. It was kind of unexpected. We knew we had a good team, but there were other teams that were very good also. And as Steve alluded to, with Coach Ronzano putting stuff together and putting people in the right places, the team really came through and won everything. So I'm going to read off the list of the people who aren't here and then save the one who is here for last. So these are the young ladies that contributed to the championship: Mary Abraham, Hannah Alex, Nikki Anelli, Maggie Bordenero, Fallon Brown, Julie Byrne, Nicole Cooper, Marina Daywalt, Amy Dominic, Camille Dunham, Maddie Eastmore, Caitlin Evans, Julia Foley, Sydney Hargrove, Sienna Harris, Olivia Hoover, Juliana Keenan, Amanda Kuberski, Julia Malachowski, Alexa Marburger, Caitlin McClure, Erin McKelvey, Corinne Meyer, Sarah Nicoletti, Meredith O'Donnell, Tina Prince, Lauren Przaki, Cameron Rodriguez, Becky Sobek, Rory Stein, Carly Ukulovic, Cerise Walker, Maggie Welsh, and Sabrina Williams. And a special thanks to Maura Duffy, who is our representative for the evening. All right, thank you, Maura.
Let's go. You get a picture? 3-on-1. Let's go. Oh, sorry. Jump right in. Picture with it? Sure.
Now you know why we're so good. We have a 3-to-1
And in closing, as many of you know, this is certainly not an excuse. It's more just a fact. We are competing in a highly competitive division, highly competitive conference, and it's a true testament to the programs that were able to win conference champions this past spring, given the size of the schools that they're competing against. It's an even bigger accomplishment. So congrats to those two programs, and we again appreciate Dr. Zerbe and the school board for recognizing those spring accomplishments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we're proud of our academics as well as our athletes, and thank you so much. This evening, second on the agenda, we have a transportation update by Mr. Bricker. We'll ask the board to transition to the seats in the front. I think Mr. Bricker has a handout, and we'll be placing a presentation up on the screen. If we could transition to the seats, I'd appreciate that.
Okay, I get to follow the track meets that won everything with transportation, so I'm sure I'm set up to succeed here. So what we're going to go tonight, we're going to go over the district operations, the responsibilities, the management team, the challenges that we've had and how we're dealing with them, the current status, and the focus going forward. Right now, the district's responsible for transporting about 5,500 students to private, parochial, and charter schools that are within a 10-mile distance from the nearest boundary. We transport these students to about 82 different locations. We receive approximately 5 to 10 changes per week. We have a 3-tier system in the AM and PM, which when you look at 94 routes, you would look at 94 times 6, not just 94 times 3, which gets you in close to the 600 number of routes that we run each day. The district oversees First Students and 7 other third-party vendors, which we coordinate and provide all kinds of different services to different students for different reasons, whether it be to accommodate special needs, displaced students, special events, athletics, work study, field trips, whatever it is. We work really hard as a group to try and make sure these events are successful. Over the years, we've had many challenges with driver retention, routing, capacity, ride time, and communications, and that's what we're really working to improve upon each year going forward. Responsibilities, the business office has contract management and state reporting, call center, staffing, the communications with the parochial, private, charter schools, communications with the students and parents regarding stop times, any concerns or issues that they may have that get escalated up to us. First Student maintains the fleet of vehicles. They provide qualified drivers that take the kids around every day. They transport the students safely to and from school, extracurricular activities. I don't know if everyone remembers the snowstorm that happened, how they stayed here until like 8:30 at night on that Friday night, making sure everyone got home. They really working. They took over routing this year. They're testing of the routes, and they perform state safety checks twice a year. Core management team, I'll skip myself on that because you pretty much know me. I'm going to introduce you back here. You have Kim Musser. She is the site manager for First Student. Kim has a vast experience with First Student, and she was actually the assistant location manager in Allentown, PA. We also have over here Karen Mussup, who has been taking over the routing. Karen is new to First Student, especially at Methacton here. She does live in the district, so she does know the roads and the information, so it's been very valuable to have her insight in some of that. She was also the safety manager at the Upper Marion location. Okay, challenges that we've had. So we've had driver shortage challenges, we've had routing challenges, capacity and ride time, and communication issues. So we're really working hard to address these. First Student has been advertising, increasing their wages, and really trying to put out incentives to attract drivers and really try and recruit as many as they can. That's to help with the driver shortage. The district, last year it was who had what piece, so this year now all the routing is under First Student. We are overseeing it, but they are getting all the routes straightened out. They're fixing them and trying to streamline them so that they work good. Capacity and ride time parameters, we provided them. I've been working really close with First Student on creating a report that will actually track that information to make sure that the ride times are known and the capacity is within our target numbers. We have reporting that we didn't have last year, to my knowledge. And then we'll be coordinating the stop information, which will come through the SIS, which is Power School. We'll have a call center process that we went over, and we're going to continue to go over. We're going to work on protocols for communications. And most importantly, on each one of these things, we're going to continue to work harder to make sure we improve year to year. Where we stand with the drivers, there's 91 drivers that are projected for the start of school. 86 regular drivers are currently on staff. 5 drivers are in training. There's an additional 5 certified drivers that are in operational staff. The number of regular drivers needed will depend on the number of buses that are out on routes at any one time. So not all 90, if we had 104 buses, all 104 don't go out at the same time. 50 may go out in the morning, another 30 at the second, starting at the second tier. So we need to know what the maximum number of buses are out at any one point in time, and that's the number of drivers that we need to have on staff, plus some backup positions. And we're working with First Student to create that number. The district is, again, working with third-party vendors. We've had conversations with the potential of having a third-party vendor be on site or be ready to run some of the routes, I should say. They will pick up in case there's any driver shortage, so that we will have a number of drivers available and make sure that we have excess staff on the first day of school. So routing, some of the changes that we've done this year. One of the big things is we've moved up the no later than arrival time to 5 minutes before the bell times. We do have a challenge, which is in the PM section, Arcola and Skyview. In the morning, you have a 35-minute gap between when the bus is supposed to be there. So the no later arrive time at Arcola is 8 a.m. and it's 8:35 a.m. at Skyview. It's a 35-minute window. If you look at the student dismissal starts at Arcola and Skyview, you're looking at 2:50 and 3:15. That's 25 minutes. Now, it doesn't sound like much, but that 10 minutes is sort of reasons why some of the kids will ride a different bus home at times, because there's no way to get the other buses back in that 10-minute window that we lose. We target to have the same AM and PM buses for the elementary schools. That's one of the big things that we've been working on. We're cleaning up the overlapping routes, and we've actually had the drivers run the routes and taken their feedback, and we're going to be using that to the most that we can. Bus capacity and ride times. So this is kind of the Methacton School District target seating capacity and ride times. So K through 6, we take the manufacturer's capacity, divide it by 3, and times it by 2.5, and that gives us our seating capacity target. So for a 72-passenger bus, that would equate to 60, and for a high school, instead of multiplying it by 2.5, we multiply it by 2, so that turns a 72-passenger bus into 48. The ride time targets are the same as they were last year, which is 50 minutes for Methacton School District and 60 minutes for non-public, private, and charter school students. So this is the timeline for the communications for this year. On the 27th, I'll be sending out a notice to the non-public, private, and charter schools, letting them know the timing of the events and letters going out to the parents. On the 30th, the school district will communicate to the families the timeline of when the Power School portal will be open, the date of the mailing, and all that will be done via school messenger. On the 13th of August, First Student will provide the finalized routes and the detail for Methacton to go over and review. The 15th, the final review will be completed. Those notices will be sent to the families via the printer. The printer will send them out, and we'll also use school messenger to send them out also. Come August 20th, we're going to have the call center staffed and operational. They'll be trained the week prior, so they'll have 4 individuals that are ready to go and understand how to work the system. And then August 29th will be the first student day. So for the call center, as I said, we're going to have 4 trained staff. We're going to be coordinating this effort between Methacton and First Student to make sure we address all the concerns of the parents, the change requests, the ride times, and any issues, and making adjustments. That will be worked with myself, Kim, and Karen to make sure that these efforts are, we find out what's going on and which ones we can fix and prioritize to make the most changes the most effective. We'll be entering the inbound calls into a database, which is where we'll be prioritizing these, and we're going to continue this effort until we feel it's no longer needed. So the late bus protocol. If a bus is more than 15 minutes late, under the Methacton guidelines, the information will be collected, the school that the bus is going to, the number, the estimated delay, and the reason for delay. They'll then contact Angela Lynch. If they can't reach her, they'll reach Kathy Kuiper. If they can't reach her, then they'll reach me. I'm only there, and Kathy's only there if Angela can't be reached. They are also required to call the school that's impacted by the ride so that they're aware of why the bus is being late. And that's whether the bus is going home or coming into the school. Additional steps may be required, such as if there's a major issue, a major accident that's blocking up one of the roads, and it's going to impact more than just that one route. They'll reach out to me, and then I can get in contact with the necessary personnel to plan on how we'll handle that. The communication of how that will be done will really depend on the number of students. If there's only 2 stops left, first student typically would give it as an example, but if it's going to be a larger population, we'll use the school messenger and send that out so that we don't have someone on the phone trying to reach everyone. We make sure they all get the message quickly. Current status. A majority of the students are placed on stops and routes. The rollover actually occurred today, and the transportation and power schools sync is being tested and validated. The routing of the kindergarten and new students is in progress. We're conducting validation of the data. That's going to be ongoing to correct roads, streets, and other different naming conventions to make sure everything's on the same page. And we're going to be planning for the specialized transportation needs. Overall, we're about a week behind our planned timeline. A lot of that is the timing as to when this information can be rolled over. First student is working to address this by working evenings and weekends, and first student is confident that they'll meet the August 7th deadline for the bidding of the routes. Going forward, this is what we're going to be focusing on. Drivers. Can't say enough about making sure we have enough drivers. We have 104 buses. We need drivers to run the routes. Kim and I will be in constant contact and making sure we have the drivers coordinated, how many routes we're going to be running, what the peak number of drivers is to make sure we have that. We're finalizing the driver contingencies, which I've already spoke about with another party to handle some of the routes potentially. We're going to try and look at all the smaller routes that are not necessarily going to require a bus and see if we can move them to one of our third-party vendors. Routing, as I learned this year, is never done. We're going to be constantly getting routing as we go through the enrollment, and as we go through the school year, there'll be students enrolling and unenrolling from us, from the non-pubs, from the charter schools. It's an ongoing effort there. And we're going to continue to look at the routes and trying to make efficiencies so that they run smoothly and run more efficiently so that the time that they're on the rides will be down. Continuous data monitoring and reporting will be shared with the board starting next week on Monday night or Tuesday morning, depending on when the availability of the data comes out. I should be able to update our weekly report similar to the one we provided you, giving you the ride times, the capacities, and the information surrounding that. And that's something I'll be doing ongoing. Once we start the school year, what I will have to be working on, which is the second phase of that, will be to track where we actually stand on actual versus planned. And that's the end of the presentation.
We'll ask the board members to take their seats back at the table, and we'll open the floor for any questions for Mr. Bricker.
Dr. Zerbe.
At this time, are there any questions from members of the board for Mr. Bricker or any other member of the administration?
Thank you, Mr. Bricker, for the good presentation. A couple quick questions. First, welcome to both Karen and Karen and Kim, I'm sorry. Just real quick, the rate sizing of the buses is something that originally, when it was outsourced, was something that was described by first student as something that could be adjusted along the way. So if we have a bus, the right size of a bus is not 84 and we have 30 kids on it to move the buses in and out. I realize that's probably not for this year, but it's something that I think we need to make sure, certainly overcapacity or not enough capacity on the bus is the most important, but also I thought that we had some flexibility on which buses we use.
We do. In fact, First Student's acquiring 13 new buses this year, which will give us a manufacturer's additional seating of 347 seats. One of the things we're going to do this year is we're going to work on getting the routes and the run times down, and then we'll look to make sure that we have the right size buses and see what we have with regards to that. One of the things we already talked about is we have a small 1 or 2 passenger ride. There's no reason for first student to take a full-time driver and handle that if we can give that to a third-party vendor and use them more efficiently.
Tim, you also had mentioned something around the potential of opting out on the out route. Is that something that is legally allowed, and also is it something to be pursued this year or not?
So the opting out would be for the senior parking. We chose not to go that route for this year as part one. Right now, the senior parking is all year round, same spot all year round. We'll evaluate that for next year with Mr. Sergini, Dr. Sergini, with regards to that. And we are also had the non-public and charter schools fill out the Act 372, which is the request for transportation. So if we find that there are stops that the students are not getting on and there's no Act 372, we can then adjust the routes accordingly to expedite those routes.
All right, and then I definitely appreciate everybody's approach around data, and I ask again, please run some queries beforehand. You know, some of this stuff can be caught along the way, where if it says that it's the same address and it's the same school, but it's different bus stops or different times, it equals error. We should be able to run queries around that and use data to not have parents identify it, that their kids are 10 minutes apart going to the same school type of thing. So as much of that pre-work and pre-screening, the better, to be a much cleaner process this year. Thanks.
Other questions from members of the board?
The only thing that I would say is I received a lot of feedback about private schools getting contact. Now, I know the private schools are responsible for letting the parents know, but I received a lot of feedback just from them saying we were never notified that the buses were late, even though it's not Methacton, it's the private schools that are responsible to let them know. But just going back to the private schools when they are contacted and reminding them they have to contact the parents. Because I feel like that was a lot of feedback that I received from them.
It's difficult. We have the rosters not always providing us with contact information for the parents. It is on that school to make sure they reach out to the parents. We are looking at options to try and work on that, but right now it really does fall on that school to notify their students that they're enrolled with.
And it's unfortunate because it looks bad upon us, even though that's their responsibility. But if there's like a general letter that you send that all things have been done, please remind your parents that we will be in contact. Something that just doesn't make us, because all this hard work that you're putting into it, it's unfortunate that. And the other thing is, I mean, if we could have AM and PM drivers be the same when they're going out and they're picking their routes, that would be amazing for families, parents, children, if they're the same drivers. Thanks.
Other comments?
I have one question in the communication section on the late bus protocol. Well, let me back up for a second. First of all, after looking at this presentation and hearing what you had to say, Mr. Bricker, I feel much more comfortable and confident going into this than I did a few months ago and a year ago. So it's clear that you've put a lot of time and effort into this, and I feel like we've got the staff, we've got the plan. I feel like we're in a good place. The late bus protocol. If the bus is going to be more than 15 minutes late, everything about notification sounds good until we get to the additional steps, and it says first student or Methacton School District will communicate to parents if appropriate. And I just worry that there's no clear delineation as to when it is appropriate. And unfortunately, what ends up happening 9 times out of 10 is when the bus is late, the parents are finding out because a student is calling home or texting home and telling their parents that the bus is running late. I know there's no way to avoid that happening. We're not that fast. Nobody is. But I just want to know, do we have a clear, like, if it's this, then you call, if it's this, then you don't call? Do we have a clear scenario planned out?
So first, all the efforts, Karen and Kim have been a big help. So while I'm pulling together information, they're the ones that are doing the routing and making sure everything's getting done correctly. So start with that. Typically, There is no delineation. It's usually a conversation with Angela and the dispatcher that's calling. It depends on how many. If it's like a couple students towards the end of a run, the first student will make the call rather than blast it out to all one. It's something I can evaluate and get back to you on, is whether or not it's 5, 10, or how many stops it is, and bring that up at Property and Transportation Committee. Maybe they can set a guideline on that.
So then I guess maybe I'm misreading this, because the way that I'm reading this is that the last step is that someone will decide whether or not parents should be contacted, but it sounds like it's really whether first student will do it or Myth Acton will do it?
That's correct. It's just who's doing it.
Okay. So that alleviates one of my concerns then, is that at least parents will be contacted, but I do agree that we need to make it clear as to who is doing it, because in those situations, it's very easy to make assumptions, and we all know what happens when that is done. So, thank you.
Other comments? Mr. Ryan?
I just have two quick questions here. The first one is, when a family gets their notice of, what bus they'll be on and what time it is, if they note that there seems to be an issue there, something that doesn't quite seem right, what timeline are they being given as response time? That was a big conversation last year that, some people would get a call back in an hour and other people wouldn't receive a call back for a week. Is there a set guideline that we're saying that we'll get back to you in?
We have, my first year with the call center, I have not gone through all those different procedures. We just started going over the training, the staffing, the telephone lines. Just when I got my own little training on the database entry system today. So that will be stuff that we have to figure out, is how we prioritize it, how the communication gets back, how we want to handle that information. I have not gotten that far yet.
Okay. I would just make a note that this was a high priority item last year that was, most of the comments that we got were about communication. So I think the timeliness of the communication back, so that people at least know, even if we don't have a response for you, a definitive response, but we're looking into it, I think gives a little bit of peace of mind. The other one I have is around the validation process. Paul touched on this a little bit, but you mentioned the transportation and SIS systems sync is being tested, validated. How is that being tested?
So as the enrollments for the non-pubs are sent to us, I've logged them into a spreadsheet so we can track it and match that up against BusBoss. We also have the download that we can get out of Power School. So in theory, if I have 800 people on the non-pub school and I have 1,000 in the Myth Acton, I should have 1,800 routed. So that's how it should be working. So we went through that today and we did some data scrubs. Karen and I were going through that, and we found some errors and some issues with regards to the data, and we cleaned those up on my side and streamlined that. We are sitting about 300 and some for each elementary schools. It looks really good to where we are with the rollover so far. Updated data will come in through tonight's sync. I think one of the biggest problems we had last year was that the sync was not always working, and that was some of the enrollments were getting deleted or moved out. That issue has been removed. So, right now the big thing will be to test what's in Power School, what's in my log, and making sure those numbers are relatively the same.
Okay. That sounds good. I might make the recommendation kind of along with what Paul was saying here that, before the final notice goes out to all families, that we run some type of sample size, whether it's, eyeball 50 routes or, 50 stops, or just however you want to do it. Maybe it's 100 or however, but just, the eye test. Does this pass? Does everything make sense? As Paul indicated before, the report was sent to the board where we were able to see within 5-10 minutes that something doesn't look right. So if we could get that done ahead of it going out to the parents, that would be great. Thank you.
My goal is no 3 a.m. drop-offs.
Other questions?
Yeah, first, Tim, let me say that I know this year, just for everybody in the audience, there's an additional layer of oversight on transportation that wasn't there in the past. We've added transportation as one of our board committees and rolled it into property. As a chair, Tim, I guess I'll formally apologize because I know I've asked you for a lot of information and data and pushed to make sure that we get this right. I do want to say thank you. The presentation that you gave tonight clearly laid out, in my mind at least, that we understand where the issues were last year, and I'm cautiously optimistic that we've taken all the right steps to address them. Karen, I will tell you that this man sings your praises the second Monday of every month. of all the great work you were doing. So thank you for everything that you're doing. I'm glad we have somebody local in that position. Tim, a couple other questions. I guess regarding drivers, do we have any concerns, and maybe Kim, Karen, whoever wants to answer this question, do we have any concerns as we get closer to school? I know we made some changes as far as benefits and whatnot so that we think we can avoid that exodus that we saw last year right ahead of school. But I guess, do we have any concerns? And if we do, what are the biggest ones?
So typically what happens is the resignation of the drivers will happen in the first week of September, and that's mainly due to the fact that they get a full month's worth of benefits associated with that. Dr. Zerby and I were going over different options today, and he suggested that we look to this other company to maybe handle some of the routes and have like a surplus of drivers on hand for the first week. I briefly was discussing that with Kim today. I'm going to research more of that tomorrow. So maybe hypothetically, they take over a couple of the routes, they run them, they know them in advance, and then first student will take them back once the driver situation is confirmed on how many they have. That way, at least the first start of the school, they may have a couple surplus drivers, but at least they'll have the extra ones to get the work done.
Thanks. As far as the balance of drivers that we have now, how many are new? How many are new to the district? Relative experience levels. I mean, do we have a lot of experienced drivers?
As far as I know, Ralph, well, everybody that we have on board right now is not really brand new. We have 5 brand new people that are in training right now. Everybody else has been here for at least 6 months or more.
Okay, great. So they've driven our routes. They're familiar with the area. Great.
Then they work through the summertime also with ESY.
Okay. Tim, on slide 10, on the timeline, the one thing missing out of here is, and I guess as a parent first and a board member second, I know the expectation of parents, when are we going to actually get a notice? When is that going to be in Power School? Because, there was an accident with Power School this week, and people started getting teams schedules ahead of time. People want to know. When can they expect to get that information?
I'm not sure how the sync will work, but I'm assuming it would either be the 15th or the 16th, based on what I was explained.
Okay. When those reviews go out, I think are we going to publish these dates as far as especially the call center, right? It'll be open on the 20th to address issues. Okay, great.
So that's the July 30th. The notice of the timeline of when the Power School portal and all that will be up. That'll be sent out on the 30th, so parents will know by the 30th as to what's going on and when.
Okay, great. And then I think the last question I had was the other common concern I've heard from parents about, and we see it on social media every once in a while, is what list do I have to sign up for to make sure that I get notified?
No.
Parents are going to be notified based on the information that's in the student information system, right?
Yes.
So everybody's information, if you're going to this school, if you're going to this district, your information is there. People don't have to worry about signing up for School Messenger or something along those lines, correct?
Should be in Power School, which communicates with School Messenger.
Excellent. And on the comment, I guess Mike made a comment before, or I guess, I'm sorry, it was Kim, talking about timing of notifications and responsibility of notifications. I would lean towards the side of over-communication. I know it happened during a snowstorm last year, and we were getting phone calls and tweets and Facebook messages about buses being late. It was too much, but it was great, especially considering where we've been. So I would wait for people to complain about hearing too much about the fact that their kid might be late on the bus. And then my last comment on slide 13, you talked about the rollover occurring today. For the people that aren't so familiar with this, can you talk about what that rollover actually is?
So the rollover is the main piece of it is the addition of the new students that have been enrolled and the kindergarten students and all the other classes being bumped up a grade. So obviously a kindergartner going to first grade, first to second, and so forth. That is the big piece of the rollover. And then obviously the seniors that have graduated would then be removed from that. And like I said, all the other enrollments that have occurred throughout the year will then be transferred into the system. So starting tomorrow, or tonight, Karen gets to start routing those students. I'm not sure exactly what time the sync happens, but provided I don't get a failure notice tomorrow morning, I'll be a real happy person.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from members of the board? If not, thank you very much, Mr. Bricker, and we'll move on with the agenda for this evening.
All right, moving on, we will head right into reports. Finance Committee, Mr. Earnshaw.
Thank you. Finance Committee met on July 11th. The meeting was called to order at 7:30 p.m. All committee members except for Mr. Navarrete were in attendance. The first item on the agenda was the monthly financial reports. Mr. Bricker presented the list of bills, treasurer's report, and expenditure and revenue reports. He provided responses to the questions received in the committee at the meeting and via email prior to the meeting. No budgetary transfers. We did discuss the future process of budgetary transfers. On the agenda for approval tonight are the list of bills and the treasury report. And Mr. Bricker also reviewed two other reports, the Healthcare Consortium report and the Master Plan Fund Tracking report. Discussion topics, Mr. Bricker gave an update on the audit as delineated in the minutes. He provided an update on the state budget. Our allocated share of the basic educational funding was about $69,000 higher than what we had in the budget for the coming year. Some other matters that were not on the agenda we discussed. Ms. Cancro inquired about the mental health program funding and the contingent elementary teacher positions, including in the budget. Dr. Zerbe responded. I asked Mr. Bricker to provide an update on an issue discovered relating to due dates on the Lower Providence property tax bills. And Mr. Bricker reported that the Lower Providence tax bills were sent out with incorrect due dates as a result of an error by the tax collector, who will be sending notification to taxpayers at his expense to provide the correct due dates. I also commented on the upcoming budget process and the continuing incorporation of the current year forecast in the process, use of a budget book, and our need to conclude on staffing plans and building needs. Courtesy to the floor, Paul Winter has asked about costs relating to the Arrowhead chiller and the master plan spending. Jim Mollett commented on or asked questions regarding the Lower Providence property tax bill due dates, the Shenandoah property tax appeal reserve, including planning for its use, and he provided a recommendation. Potential cost savings from closing Arrowhead and Methactis mill rate compared to other Montgomery County school districts. He also provided the committee with handouts relating to potential cost savings from Arrowhead, school closure timeline, and birth rates. He discussed these handouts along with potential cost savings from eliminating 36 teachers. The meeting adjourned at 8:28 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Earnshaw. Property and Transportation Committee, Mr. Navarrete.
The Property and Transportation Committee met on July 9th. The meeting was called to order at 6:30 p.m. All committee members were in attendance, as were Dr. Zerbe, Mr. Bricker, and Mr. Fretz. Also present were Mr. Sakala from Fidavia and Mr. Miller from Fidavia. Hitting the high points of these minutes, Mr. Miller presented a revised timeline for the master plan work that was updated to recognize the acceptance of summer project at the July committee meeting and then at this full board meeting. Heading on to the actual projects at Arcola, Mr. Miller updated the committee on progress at the Arcola Auditorium and noted that the project is on schedule to be substantially complete by November 30th, and the MEP overhead work remains the critical path item for completion. He noted a small change order would be coming to resolve path conflicts between the HVAC ductwork and existing structure. That was discussed at last week's work session. For the tab and commissioning of the HVAC systems, Mr. Miller noted that there were 5 firms who were sent the RFP, but only HT Lyons, who conducted similar work here in the LGI, responded. Because the bid amount was small and in line with similarly sized projects, they recommended accepting the loan proposal, which is on the agenda for this evening. At the high school, work is proceeding according to plan. It was noted that on the gym roof, 2 leaks were noted during the July 4th rainstorm. One was traced back to in-progress work that had not been properly isolated ahead of the storm, while the other was caused by a plugged drain line and was not associated with the roof replacement work. The contractor on the project, to their credit, took responsibility for the roofing error. The owner was immediately on site and did offer to pay for the district's repair costs associated with that. From a safety perspective, Mr. Fretz noted that appropriate railings and tie-offs were being used by the roofing contractor, and that areas were being isolated and cleared of non-essential personnel during overhead lifts. Similarly, for the tab and commissioning of the high school HVAC systems, only one response was received. They recommended moving forward to accept the portion for the existing or for the current project, but delaying the work that would help define scope for the next phase of the project, since that's being delayed by 1 year. Under Eagleville, the RFP was recently issued for gasketing repairs on the windows there. Once received and approved, that work is estimated to take only about a week. Similarly, an RFP was issued for rerouting the drain line, the open drain line that was discovered there. For the field project at the high school, Fidavia stated that a bid package is being prepared for the repairs to the slot drain, since the cost of the work is expected to be near the $25,000 limit. In response to concerns of committee members, Dr. Zerbe commented that the work will be scheduled so that it does not impact student activities on or around the high school track. Under the 2019 master plan work, the committee discussed the proposed list from Fidavia. Most significantly, the committee addressed the need for immediate repairs to the Arrowhead cooling tower supports and chiller, which will be paid for from current year master plan bond proceeds, the prioritization of roof repairs, window masonry repair at Eagleville, and potential security improvements throughout the district. Notably, the next phase of MEP work at the high school is being postponed by 1 year due to higher priority work such as the Eagleville window repairs. It was noted by Mr. Miller and Mr. Fretz that the current HVAC work in the gym and pool areas will address the largest problem areas in the high school. Under transportation, I think we heard a lot about that tonight, but Mr. Bricker did give us an update in the meeting. He talked about that there have been no significant concerns with the current extended school year routing and execution, only the normal expected one-off issues with moves and vacations. Testing for proposed routes for the 2018-19 school year began last week, and reports with preliminary statistics on ride times have been provided to the committee and the full board. Under courtesy of the floor, John Andrews spoke about window repairs at Eagleville, the decision timeline for Arrowhead, and board approval of bus stops, and the management of facilities renovations. Jim Mollick of Worcester commented on the interconnected nature of the district projects, the need for a plan for Arrowhead, savings associated with closing Arrowhead, the anticipated return of the Malone and McBroom enrollment study update, the impact of new housing developments in Worcester, and the need to right-size the district's professional staff. Joe Bickelman of Altamont asked about or commented on the maintenance requirements for the Arrowhead cooling tower support structure, options for improved security at school entrances, and the disqualification of Waste Management's trash bid. And Jennifer Doherty of Lower Providence asked questions about common parent concerns heading into the 2018-19 school year, including the relationship between transportation and first student, the different tiers of bus services, realistic bus capacities, and the timing of bus arrivals relative to bell times. Mr. Navarrete responded that bus capacities were specified in the routing contract, which Mr. Bricker covered earlier tonight. And Mr. Bricker responded that all routes have been designed to arrive a minimum of 5 minutes prior to bell time, which we also discussed tonight. The meeting was adjourned at 9:39 p.m. I'd also like to add just one comment. Earlier this week, Mr. Fretz was polite enough to give me a tour of all of these facilities, both through Arcola, we went through the high school, we went through Arrowhead, looking at some of the deepest, darkest parts of our school district. So I want to thank you for that, Mr. Fretz. It was educational. It was good to put my eyes on a lot of stuff in person and see the needs that are out there. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Navarrete. Education Committee, Ms. Reese.
We did not have a July meeting. Our next meeting is scheduled for August 6th.
Thank you. Policy Committee, Ms. Hall. I think I already know the answer to this one, though, but go ahead.
We did not meet for July. I have no report this evening.
Thank you. And Intermediate Unit, Mr. Ryan.
Actually, I have one more.
Still, Mr. Winter, you got another free sandwich out of the deal?
Yes, I did. I do want to say that serving on the board for 6 months was a good experience, so I appreciate being able to do that. The biggest on the traditional part of the meeting that was held on June 27th at the IU was the extension of Dr. George's contract. Dr. George is a very experienced and well-respected director and has done a fair amount of changes in the last 3 or 4 years at the IU. And in 2016, he was elected to the Executive Council of Association of Education Service Agencies. I think he's actually the head of that now also. So he is truly a resource that's known throughout the state and throughout the country, and he's luckily working for Montgomery County. As part of the meeting, also, the terms that we had voted on, so Mike will be taking over, and there's also a new board that will be commencing in August at the first meeting. And the other part of it was that there was a transfer of the general fund of $2 million related to the improvements that will be made on the Main Street facility. That's part of the cost, but it was moved out of the general fund and into the capital project fund. And I will give this one last time, which is Ms. Valento's summary of community and government relations. There is a lot here, and I could go on forever, and I will not do that to everybody, but the Farm Bill reauthorization bill was approved by the agriculture, on the federal side, the Agricultural and Nutrition Act of 2018, H.R. 2, passed by a vote of 213 to 211. This is a very important bill because it introduces strict work requirements on those in need for supplemental nutritional assistance programs and limits the category eligibility. So the CBU, the Congressional Budget Office, estimates that the change will mean that 265,000 fewer children will lose access to free lunches. The Senate bill was a little less benign, less harsh, I guess you'd say. But the expectation, I do not honestly have an update on this, but the expectation is that the Senate would make the changes and follow the House's lead, unfortunately. And that would have been done in late June. The fair share fees was a Supreme Court ruling on a vote 5-4, many have probably already heard about. The court ruled that states and public sector units may no longer require workers to pay agency fees. So that is a big change for our unions. I won't get into more of that. The Pennsylvania House and Senate are in recess after an election year getting all their business done by June 30th. But there was, the budget includes House Bill 2121 is a $32.7 million spending bill and a 2.2% increase. There's no tax increases, and as Brian pointed out, we did receive some additional funding. There's a lot of, some money going into safety programs, safe schools, a lot of talk on both the federal and the state level around safety programs and putting things out there. Generally, what has been done so far on the federal level is just a lot of conferences for the most part. On House Bill 1448, which is the school code bill, there's a lot of activity. Highlight a couple of things. The delay, again, in the Keystone exams until 2021. Executive sessions permits a public school entity to hold an executive session to plan, review, and discuss matters related to school safety in a public if a public discussion will be reasonably likely to impair the effectiveness of such measures or create a likelihood of jeopardizing the safety or security of an individual or school, including a building, public utility, resource, infrastructure, facility, or information storage system. So what that means is traditionally, as executive session, talking about safety was not protected under the, as an exception to the Sunshine Law. There's some changes to third-party services. Also, there is some changes, I think October, November last year, there was an Act 55 of 2017, which now has been removed. That requires a school entity to realign its professional staff so as to ensure that more senior employees are provided the opportunity to fill any positions within the school entity for which they certified or are being filled by less senior employees. So this reinstates the bumping rights provisions that were there prior to the fall. Two more. Fire and emergency evacuation drills mandates that school, there's a lot of activity around school safety, but this bill, Act 55, provides districts the option to conduct a security drill for one of the required fire drills, but not mandate the security drill. Additionally, after the first 90 days, the school year, school districts are permitted, but not required, to conduct 2 additional school security drills per school in each school building, in place of 2 fire drills. So I imagine Dr. Zerbe and the staff will be determining that. And I think I'll just pass on the last one. So that ends my report.
Thank you, Mr. Winters. I'm assuming you signed Mr. Ryan up for a lot of extra committees and stuff like that with the IU as well.
Yes.
Okay. North Monco Technical Career Center, is there a report this month?
We did not meet. Our next meeting is August 20th.
Okay. We don't have our student board representatives here because it's their summer vacation, and that brings us to the Methacton Education Foundation. Mr. Beam and Ms. Krelovich.
Thanks very much. You're going to hear from both of us briefly. Initially, I just want to start off by talking about something that's important to all of us, I think everybody in this room, and that is early childhood education, specifically pre-kindergarten education. All of you know, and probably everybody in this room knows, that children between ages of infancy and 5 years old, I'm told by my wife and by other educators, that's the most important time frame for those children as they develop in every respect. And many of our families in the Methacton School District send their children to private schools to do that, but not all are able to. Some of our economically disadvantaged families are just not able to send their children to school, so those kids do not have the opportunity to take advantage of those programs, and so when they enter kindergarten, they often are not coming in with the same benefits that their peers have had by attending private schools. Well, that's something that Dr. Zerbe and I, on behalf of the foundation, have been very concerned about, and along with Angela Lynch, we've been working on this summer trying to correct that and figure out a way to allow scholarships, to have scholarship money provided so that the children of these, I'm just going to call them economically disadvantaged families, families who don't have the money to send their kids to private pre-K programs, can do so. We have come upon a very positive situation with the YMCA, which is prepared, has curriculum, has teachers, and discussions are ongoing. We had a conference call yesterday morning, and Dr. Zerbe and I have another conference call with the YMCA people this Friday. We are pushing forward fast and hard. We are hoping, if things go well, we would like to see some students participating this fall. Okay, very short time frame, but we're working hard to do it. If it doesn't work, then it would certainly start in January, but we are committed to do everything we can to make this a reality. This is something that the foundation will pay for in terms of the cost, at least the lion's share, if not the entire cost, and we're still working out the details. There are a lot of discussions that are ongoing. The YMCA is also planning to participate financially in this, so it's an exciting opportunity for that's going to benefit everyone, but particularly the economically disadvantaged kids within the district. In order to help pay for this, the foundation is raising money through a number of ways, but one is something that I've mentioned before in this venue, and that is an EIT, a program through the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the EITC program. And this is something where people, and they make the rules, we don't make them, the Commonwealth makes the rules, but for people who have in Pennsylvania income tax liabilities of $3,500 or more, okay, people who basically earn $103,000 or more in terms of Pennsylvania taxable income can participate in this, and it is simply by allocating your Pennsylvania income tax liability to this program to support this pre-K program. It doesn't really, the cost is minimal at best. You get a 90% tax credit when you participate in a 2-year program. I have information that I can PDF, email to people. We also have information in the form of brochures, and we are reaching out to people in the community to see if they will participate in this. This is different from asking people to contribute to another charitable organization like we might to the American Cancer Society or the Girl Scouts or the Boy Scouts or any other organization. This is something where you simply allocate your Pennsylvania tax liability to this program. My wife and I personally participate. We participated last year. It works. It is a godsend. It is just a wonderful situation, and I am really hoping that many within the Methacton community and many friends of people in the Methacton community who fit those who qualify by having that income. And this is one other thing that's very, very important. Last year I reported on this. You had to work for a business. You know, the qualifications were more restrictive. Pennsylvania somehow has determined, thankfully, that they will broaden the scope of this so that if you work for a nonprofit or if you are retired, you can now participate. Last year you could not. But anyone who has Pennsylvania taxable income of over $103,000 or Pennsylvania tax liability of $3,500 or more can participate. So I'm hoping that some of you here in this room will qualify and contact me or contact Nikki or contact Angela Lynch. And if you don't personally, I'm sure you're going to know friends and others who might qualify. Hopefully we can raise a lot of money and take care of all of these children who badly need these services. That's my report. Nikki has the rest.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Dr. Zerbe and board members. Jim had the exciting news tonight, the pre-K scholarship program that we're working on. But to give you an idea of some of the other things that the foundation's working on, we've spent the last month working, meeting one-on-one with, so far I've met with 5 of the 7 principals to talk to them, get an idea, not just what they're looking to do in their schools, but to educate them a little bit more about how the foundation can work with them to fund some of the projects on their wish list. We're also working on our 2018-2019 Fund Development Plan and Calendar, which will include a staff campaign at the beginning of the year. We are doing a lot of research, and there's a lot of institutions and foundations that we don't even qualify for their big money grants if we don't have staff participation in our campaign. So we'll be working on that as well. We're also going to be developing a parent campaign later on in the fall. And we have a board retreat that we're planning for the 21st to fine-tune a lot of these things. And last but not least, make sure you've got the We Run Out Hunger on your calendars for August 25th. It's a 5K or a 1-mile walk, so I hope to see you all there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beam. And Ms. Krelovich.
If I could I jump in there for a second?
Sure.
I just want to say thank you very much to the foundation. You guys do so many amazing things throughout the community. The pre-K scholarship program is just another great example of that. As board members, we all have certain causes that are near and dear to us, and pre-K education is one of them for me. So whether it's advocating for pre-K for PA or pre-K counts or expanding the Jump Start program, I mean, what you guys are doing is amazing work. I just want to say thank you.
For communications, I see that Ms. Lynch is not here this evening. I don't know if Dr. Zerbe has anything for that, or okay, then we'll catch up with her next month. And then we'll move on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Zerbe.
Thank you. I have 2 items, actually 3 items. First, there's advisements under my area. Those are for your reading and for your information purposes. But I have 2 other matters that I'd like to bring to the board's attention. The first matter has to deal with some of the language and the work that we have going forward as a result of the arbitration with the Methacton Education Association in the settlement of the most recent contract. There's a section in that agreement that basically has the panel discussing the need for reform in the step movements within the salary schedule to be more consistent and more equitable. To that end, the panel of arbitrators direct that no later than July 1st, 2018, the parties shall form a joint labor management task force consisting of 4 labor representatives and 4 management representatives who, together with their respective advisors, shall explore improvements to the schedules, and that no later than March 1st, 2019, the task force shall make a joint recommendation to the parties for improvement to the schedules for a successor agreement. So it's my pleasure this evening just to inform the board and the public that there has been work in this area. There has been actually 2 meetings to date by this task force, 4 members of the Methacton Education Association and 4 members of management, including 2 members of the board as well as 2 members of my administration. And we've met on 2 occasions, and we have a 3rd meeting in the works to be scheduled. It's my understanding that the discussions are going in a positive direction, and it's my hope that there can be a recommendation by the due date that's listed in the arbitrator's decision. With that said, my second piece of information relates to the agenda this evening. I want the board and the public to know that I'm going to recommend that an item listed under Other on the agenda, and it would be considered item 13D1, and that will be, and it will read as follows: approve the separation agreement and release by and among the Methacton School District, the Methacton Education Association, and Robert Rosado, employee. I'm making that comment here this evening as a matter for the board to act upon when we come to number 13D1 on the agenda, as amended.
Thank you, Dr. Zerbe. At this time, I'll take public comment on board action items. Mr. Andrews.
Good evening. John Andrews, Lower Providence. Mr. Bickelman will not be here this evening, but I'm sure he's pleased that the minutes of the June voting meeting were corrected. Last week I spoke to the issue of the list of bills. Two items with regard to the graduation event, the stage equipment item of $27,000 and the stage materials of about $9,000. I'm hoping I get an explanation of that item. I did check, and there were no such items a year ago. Also on the list of bills, for the bond fund for the 27B bond fund, there's an item for the renumbering of high school rooms for $3,800, and I can't imagine that would have been an item that showed up in the architect's 2016 report. I think that's a normal maintenance item. I don't think it's an item that we should be borrowing money for and then paying it back in a decade. That should be in the general fund. rather than against the bond issue. There's also a list of coaches for the fall sports. For the high school football program, it's about $40,000 worth of coaching remuneration, and that gets to be such a substantial amount that somehow I think that the board is entitled to investigate that in some way. It's not inconceivable that we don't have enough players for a team. We certainly don't have 80 players on the team, and I think that we've got other sports where maybe the coaching fees are maybe $5,000, whatever, and there's a bigger turnout. So I think that's an item worthy of study. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Any others for public comment on board action items? Dr. Malik?
Jim Malik, Worcester. I didn't catch what Mr. Winters had to say about his last item that he passed on. What was the topic? I missed it.
That's not a voting item for this evening.
Well, it's a part of the reports.
You can bring that up during courtesy of the floor.
Oh, okay. Well, why don't we go to weapons, page 7, policy. I would have brought this up at a meeting if we had it. What's the district's policy regarding concealed carry? Do we have one? Because I think you need to table your policy until you take a more comprehensive approach to your weapons policy. Does anybody know what you can do with somebody who comes on a property who's concealed carry? Because I do. So if I do, you should. You ever hear of 18 PACS 912C? Did you ever hear of Goslin Superior Court case that involves that statute? Did you ever hear of the Supreme Court who overturned the act that forbid guns on school property? The congressional case. The Supreme Court overturned it. Interstate Commerce Clause. Okay. Well, you can allow concealed carry on the property by permission of the superintendent. That's you. You can address it through policy. And then by 18 PACS 912C, because it can be a defense that it's possessed for lawful purposes. So, somebody comes in the back here with a concealed carry, you call the cops, they prosecute him, he exerts that defense, and then he's acquitted, he can come after you for a civil rights violation. That's what I'm trying to tell you. So, have you thought this through when you did your policy? Now, the reason I bring this up, are you aware you had a Methacton basketball game where somebody brought a gun and there was a fight, and then somebody had a gun. Then they brandished the weapon during the fight. I think you were aware of it. Brandishing a weapon is, I think, a felony. That's why I think you need a policy, because if you have a basketball game, fight breaks out, somebody's got a gun at the game, brandishes the weapon. I think the administration was aware of it. Probably should have had the policy made after that incident, right? Well, could you look into it, please?
Dr. Mullet, could you please wrap up?
Oh, I'm wrapped up. Everybody up there's a clam. I'm bringing up a valid point about weapons on school property, and everybody up there is just looking at me like deers in a headlight. I can't believe it.
Anyone else for for public comment on board action items? Okay, seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the special meeting minutes and the work session minutes of June 19th, 2018, and the board meeting minutes of June 26th, 2018 as attached? Ms. Drummond, can I have a second? Ms. Cancro, any comments from the board? All those in favor? The motion carries 9-0. Fiscal items, Mr. Bricker.
Tonight for your approval, I have the list of bills, the treasurer's report. There are no budgetary transfers. Master plan contracts, there's 4 of them. 2 for testing and balancing, 1 at the high school, 1 at the Arcola, and then 2 masonry contracts at the high school. We also have for your approval tonight the master plan summer 2019 work authorization.
I'd like to make mention on some items related to the master plan and the master plan summer projects. Please note that it was presented to the board at the work session that the use of allowances under the Arcola project to deal with a steel matter was subsequently reviewed and okayed by the solicitor and therefore communicated to the architect and the contractors, and that work has moved forward under the guise of the current approved agreement and the allowances associated with that. And then the last matter that I want to share with you is we did make a revision from the work session to the plan as it's attached for the matters, and we've updated the scope of the work for the second year. And please remember, what this means is that you're not approving this work. What you're doing is approving the design and documentation preparation work associated with getting the bids for this work. So at some point, it's likely that we may be coming to you in another month with a couple other projects associated with the summer. In addition, you may decide when these bids come in that it's certain work that you may not want to do. So we're not actually authorizing this work. It's just preparing the documents to prepare to get the quotes and the bids for this work.
Thank you, Dr. Zerbe. May I have a motion to approve the list of bills and treasurer's report as presented? Ms. Reese, and a second. Mr. Navarrete. Any comments from the board? Mr. Ryan?
I just have one question, the follow-up question that I had from the work session regarding the legal fees. I don't know if there's an answer to that yet.
Yes, it was going to be in my update this week, so it'll be a little bit shorter. So the legal bills that you see in the description are the months. There were several different months and several different bills that were covered in that. So it did span different time frames, some of them being from the October, November, some of them being from February to April. So while the description is only limited to what we can print on the list of bills, there's more information when we look at the detail behind it. So it does cover several different months.
And then I do have a follow-up question. Does that lead to a concern from the school district's point on, timeliness of bills and when they're being presented, when they're being paid? I mean, I'm a little surprised that there are some back for as far as October. That seems off.
So I did go over some of that with the billing. Some of them came into the fact that they only sent in the total amount, and I've been trained to not pay the total amount but ask and request the details, so it took a little bit of time to get some of the back detail on that.
Anyone else with comments on list of bills and treasurer's report? Mr. Earnshaw.
Tim, just to follow up with some of the items that Mr. Andrews asked about, I know the bond fund with renumbering, we cover that at the committee meeting, so if you could just provide the explanation on that one.
So there's a lot more involved than just putting the numbers on the doors. The numbers also have to sync up to the actual plans and the emergency system, so it's not just putting a number on the door, but there's a lot more that goes into that piece of the project.
Okay. And then it was the graduation items. Got any information on that?
Those are a new stage that we bought for the graduation and the ramps associated with that stage. They will be used over and over again.
So long-term, it was better to buy than continue to rent?
Well, the one we had was not...
It was falling apart or something? Okay.
I wasn't going to say that, but...
In need of repair.
Yes.
Then there was one other item that came up last week that I'm curious about as well. There's a number of AP exam refunds on there, on the list of bills, where I guess we pay for all the AP exams up front, and then it's funded by students who want to take these exams. So when we issue refunds, do we then get refunds from the, I guess, testing service?
I can look into that and get back to you.
Okay, thanks.
It'll be in my memo. I replaced one. Good.
Okay, thanks.
I can actually answer that. The refunds for the low-income students actually are coming out of Title IV now. College Board's no longer reimbursing, but we're allowed to use Title IV money for that.
I love it when people wear different hats and take on different roles there. Okay, so do we have any other comments or questions on the list of bills and treasurer's report? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carries 9-0. Can I have a motion to approve the budgetary transfers and master plan, and master plan contracts? There are no budgetary transfers. Master plan contracts, items 1 through 4 as presented. What's that? No, that was with the list of bills, I'm sorry. Sorry, Ms. Hull was the first. And can I have a second? Mr. Navarrete, any comments from the board on these items? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carries 9-0. And item E, may I have a motion to authorize the administration to proceed with design and document preparation work in order to present bid responses for the board's review and consideration for $5,469,539 in year 2 work as presented? Ms. Cancro, can I have a second? Mr. Navarrete, any comments from the board? Mr. Ryan?
I just want to follow up with some of the stuff that I mentioned last week. In terms of the property workbook that's being used, that was sent out in the board memo. That's that one that we're talking about that Brian's reviewed and everything's being tracked and cataloged moving forward. There's no other worksheet? Or is there? In terms of what was sent to us last Friday.
Is there another worksheet other than the workbooks that you guys had prepared for me? No.
Okay.
It should be known that it's about either a month or 2 behind.
Understood. Then I do still have a major concern moving forward because a lot of the stuff listed here is still in the original bucketed categories that the master plan was in. So I had made mention that if we're approving things in this thing for summer 2019 work, right, we're not doing certain things that should have been done in the past. Like for Arrowhead in year 1, it was $800,000. Year 2, $1.2 million. Year 3, $500,000. So how is the projects that we're skipping being caught? Where are they getting dropped in later buckets, or how is this prioritization working? I mean, we had a facilities plan that identified the most important things that they needed to be done in less than a year or the first 2 years. And somewhere along the way, I have no problems, and I don't think many board members do, with the work that we're approving for 2019, but in approving this work, you're essentially not approving other work. So where's that differentiation being made? And then if you're pushing things down, how far down? You know, the first 3 years of Arrowhead work, is that going to be picked up in year 4? Where does that fall out? I'm kind of lost in this is a master plan, but I feel like there's part of the plan that's kind of missing here. So I was hoping for clarification.
So, Mike, if I can address some of that, and then Mark, you and James can say whatever your piece of it. Certainly any work regarding Arrowhead has been deferred pending any decision that we make regarding either consolidation, renovations, or rebuilding around Arrowhead, right? That's a decision that we expect to make this year, right? Dr. Zerbe is supposed to come back to the committee in August after we have the results of the updated enrollment study. So any work on Arrowhead has been limited to emergency work, such as what we talked about last week, right? The chiller, the cooling tower structure. The rest of the work still sits in that list. It's evaluated every year by Mark and his team, and then we discuss it at the committee level based on their recommendations. But everything still sits in that list, and the decisions whether to accelerate work or defer work is based on existing priorities. You know, the 10-year plan was a plan, certainly subject to modification based on current needs, such as the Eagleville windows.
I used Arrowhead because that's the most glaring example, but there are other examples here with the work that's, higher dollar amounts that were in those first 3 years, which are not being done or addressed in these 3 years. So again, I just have a concern that somewhere, and this is prior to many of the new board members joining, I've voiced this concern for the last 2 years, whether it comes to, the summer work or it's the administrative projects that they want to do. A lot of times, certain things are prioritized over others without necessarily the rationale or how far the things that are suggested are being pushed back. In regards to your comment regarding Arrowhead, I have some concern regarding that because I feel like our hands are kind of being forced to a certain degree. Because if we're going to continually choose to not invest in the school, by the time we make the decision in this next year, we're 3 years already behind in what we should have put into the building. It makes it a much different conversation than if you really tried to invest in one of the schools that we voted to keep open as a prior board. So, I mean, again, I have no problems with the work that we're approving here, but I just don't know why certain projects are being, they literally prioritized it for us twice in terms of the order and the necessity that we need to do. In terms of even codes, but whether it's safety and things like that, most of the safety items have been addressed, but some of the other ones, which are just as important, are just being kind of swept away. And I don't know where that conversation's happened. I've come to property meetings, I've read the property meeting minutes, and I just feel like there's a large portion here that's being kind of glanced over.
I guess, Mark, can you comment on the process that you guys use when we go through and evaluate, and maybe even talk about what, some of the findings as we look deeper into the facilities assessment and those projects, what the findings have been and why we prioritize certain work over others? Because I think that's a discussion that's happened here and there in property committee, but certainly hasn't happened in front of the full board.
Certainly. So the prioritization or reprioritization, first of all, we'll go back just as, again, the facilities assessment study was like a 10,000-foot view where we started out with the architect walking around and checking the buildings, et cetera. That's what they came up through, and when they came through looking at documentation and current conditions as they saw it in a matter of maybe a week of reviewing the buildings. Then after that, we got into where we are with our team now, which each time we're challenged to come back and relook at things and make sure they're valid and trying to be cognizant of the things that we see that are not rock solid maybe in the future right now. But we also know that, for instance, that water deterioration and masonry failures are critical to the overall structure of the building. So as we looked at our buildings, we know that water infiltration creates issues for us, and we have went through the study, which was to get deeper into depth into this facilities assessment study. We've hired consultants to be able to answer some of those deeper questions that we've been working through. One of them is certainly the water. So we looked at our roofs after we've gotten those results back, and we saw there were a number of roofs that have been rated Fs. So as we know that, we went back after those F roofs to stop that water from coming in, stop that deterioration. Likely the same, or also the same thing with the masonry. So as you know, as we're moving forward here, we're doing discovery still on the masonry work that is imminent here, and that in itself has cost some dollars and investigation. So you're seeing a lot of those reports now coming back. We talked about the Eagleville windows, where we had problems with the gasketing, which we thought was just gasketing. We also know that we have masonry work. So those are problems that we're experiencing right now, for example, that it may have bumped some other things out, but those are the kind of things that we're looking at as critical to being able to stabilize and then work back through this process to say, okay, what else is coming up on the table? So does that answer the question of how we've gone through it?
It does provide a little bit more information. I believe that the tracking of that is still missing, because as a board member, as I'm given this, the projects that are listed in year one in 2016-17 are still listed in 2016-17, even though they've been deferred out of that to a unknown date. So in looking at this, you literally have to go line by line to figure out which ones are truly being done in what year and which ones are missing. I mean, that's what I basically had to do, is go through and look to see which ones were in category 1 that actually have an actual cost, because that means that they've been addressed. And there's a substantial number that aren't. And then year 2 and year 3, it's the same way, that they're listed to be done in a particular year. If you're moving them out of that year, the board doesn't know what that looks like and which projects are being bucketed where.
That's a really good comment. I think allow us to go back with the team and figure out how we circle them back. So because I think the point that you're trying to get to is that you don't know where they're going to fall. You had the original, say, workbook that said they were going to be in these years. We've now put projects in place of those, and you don't know where these other ones are going to fall in. And I think is that what you're asking for? Because I think that makes sense to do.
That is certainly one.
Okay, we can work on that, because I think it's appropriate to make sure that nothing falls off the radar. And over time, it's likely that new things will be added on the radar as well. I mean, we'll discover stuff along the way, but in all fairness, I think it's important to make sure that we know on every year when we're adopting a summer plan for the next summer, that we know that, well, it's now slated, maybe not in this summer, but it's now slated for a year out or 2 years out or whatever, so that you're making an overall decision, not just a decision on that one given year.
Correct.
I got you.
It basically comes down to it's a two-part decision of you vote on what you're voting on tonight, but you're also voting for what you're not doing tonight.
That's a fair recommendation. I think we could work on that.
Okay. And just as another point of clarification, so yes, we were given this as the 10,000-foot view. Well, I don't know, that's a pretty detailed view there. But Mr. Dorn, as part of the property committee, did make sure that we went back through and we paid for the Excel file. They went through everything again with certain codes and really trying to group things. That was a big conversation at the time, was grouping things for pricing, which I know you guys are doing a great job of now. If you're doing asphalt work, you're going to try and do them all together, which I understand would move certain projects forward. But I still feel like we've gone through this a couple of times, and at some point in time, we have to come to an agreement with what is necessary to be done across the year. So we know every year, at least for the next 5 years, what the big projects are for each year and be presented as a whole. We talk a lot about in finance, we have a long-term budgeting process or forecast so that we know what to expect in the future. In terms of property, we're just given snapshots. And I think we need to come up with a larger, look at what we're going to do in each given year, knowing that 10, 15% of your work might be pop-up work, something that went wrong that you didn't expect. But there should be a plan for each project each year, and if I look at this, I don't see it. So
That list exists. That list is the same list that we've seen that's on a giant 11 by 17 paper that's been provided time and time again, that lists the projects that were set every year to be 26, for the summer 2017, summer 2018, summer of 2019, and they sit on that sheet, and they've been adjusted. You could look at that sheet and see exactly what was and was not. In fact, I think I even read from the sheet at the last meeting. That workbook that you're looking at tracks all of the projects that we have and have not done, and it has an indication on it as to what has been done and what hasn't. I guess my question is, what are you looking for that isn't there?
Well,
Because I'm not clear, and I want to make sure I take it back to the property committee and get what we're asking for.
I think Dr. Zerbe and Mr. Fretz have gotten most of what I had to say here. For Arrowhead, again, I think that's a whole different ballgame. But as a good example, at the high school, so the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, the MEP project, right? We had put a large portion of the money into it in year one, correct?
Yes.
It was a 3-stage process,
Yes.
right? So we were going to do money in year 1, year 2, and year 3. We just postponed year 2. Correct? We did not use the money in year 2 like we thought we were going to.
Well, right now, as Dr. Zerbe said, this year 2, right now, we may be coming back to you with some other work for year 2, because we still have some dollars that we wanted to look at, but right off the bat, we came through with some.
Yeah, that was a bad example you were using, but because it's actually one of the options that we presented to the property committee, and there were 2 other options that we needed to get more information on. And so once they decide which ones to move forward, you might actually see that second year.
Right. And I mean, I can go, I'm trying to get to the point of, I can go through line by line, and if Mr. Navarrete wants me to, sit down with him and pick out the individual items that I've circled on here, I'm more than welcome to do it. I just think that we're missing, and Dr. Zerbe is nodding at me, that he understands that we're missing the things that we skip. The things in the future years, we know when they're supposed to be done. But the things in the 3 years that we're now into this project that we've skipped, we don't know where they're going to fall out. That's my point. Thank you.
And I think, this, while maybe this discussion is maybe a little longer than it needed to be, I think it raises a very good point. And I got to say that, we were moving, I got to say, rather quickly to get things ready for the first year of this project. We probably had things, kind of out of sync in terms of its calendar schedule. I think this is the first year we're getting into the right schedule where this is going to be done in the summer months, and it does give us now an opportunity, and with this conversation, a real good opportunity to create that 3-year snapshot. I think going too far out is just maybe fruitless planning, but a 3-year snapshot should be a fair, representation of, what are we looking at in this, larger chunk than a year by year. So I like that suggestion, and we'll as long as the board doesn't object, I'd like to move forward with getting that information together for you.
That's a great idea.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fretz, for jumping up there and helping us out. Any other comments or questions on the master plan item? Seeing none, all those in favor of item, is this 9E? Sorry, make sure that yes, 9E1 under fiscal items. All those in favor? The motion carries. I'm sorry, motion carries 8-1 with Mr. Ryan opposed. Personnel items. Mr. Regina?
We have a number of items for the board's consideration and approval this evening. We have 2 items under resignations of our professional staff. We have 2 items under resignations for our classified staff. We have 9 items under employment of professional staff. 1 item under employment of classified staff. 1 item under employment for summer temporary. 2 items under the change of status for professional staff. 1 item under uncompensated leave for professional staff. 4 items under uncompensated leave for classified staff. 2 items under supplemental contracts, 1 item for classified substitute list, 1 item for substitute services, and 1 item for volunteers.
Thank you. Do any members of the board want to take any of these personnel items separately? Okay, can I have a motion to approve personnel items 10A through O as listed on the agenda here this evening? Ms. Reese, can I have a second? Mr. Winters, any comments from the board? Mr. Winters?
Yeah, one of the things we asked Troy before was especially around the conversation around staff resignations. So I think it's helpful for the community to understand if teachers are leaving for other districts, leaving teaching, so forth. So I'm not sure you necessarily know it. I think in this case, 1 left for private industry and 1 left for another school district. Am I correct?
That's correct.
But if you could provide that information, I think it's meaningful for everybody to know.
Sorry, go ahead, Dr. Zerbe.
Yes, so for the, are you talking about the professional staff? I'm sorry, just give me, as per the agenda, there are 2 resignations for professional staff. 1 is going into private industry, and another is going to a school district closer to where her family lives.
Any other questions on these personnel items? Ms. Drummond?
I have a question about the supplemental contract under L1 for the summer library program. It's funded through Shenandoah, and I know last time something came up, it was offset by a gift from Shenandoah. I was wondering if this was included in the first gift or if this is additional and we'll see another gift.
That's actually, there were 3 days that, or one of the weeks that there was no librarian available, and so one of our teachers stepped up to do that. The money that was presented previously did not include this $360, so this is in addition to. But it's still the bottom line is it's the same amount of time and funding.
Mr. Earnshaw?
Just one question on 10A2. The resignation date is on or before September 7th? Is there any reason for that?
Yeah, after the last meeting, Dr. Zerbe and I, you knew it right away once we left, but we have the right to hold our employees, our professional staff, for 60 days if they're going to employment to another school district. So typically when one resigns, we reserve that right to hold them for 60 days, so we'll put that date out 60 days from the resignation date. You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Earnshaw, for bringing that up for clarification. Any other comments on personnel items? Mr. Navarrete?
Yeah, down to the coach list for the fall. I know it was discussed last week, but there's still quite a few. I know Mr. Spiewak already left. There's Dr. Spiewak, excuse me. There's still quite a few vacancies that are left. Can you comment on what we're doing to fill those? Because we are 2 weeks away maybe from some of these sports starting up.
Yeah, we had 3 individuals that Dr. Spiewak presented to us a little bit late before we get them on the board agenda, but I know that he's currently working through it. One of them was girls tennis, another one was girls field hockey, and we had a replacement at another field hockey position. So he's working through those interviews and trying to fill them as quickly as possible.
Some of the other conversations we had, especially at the Arcola level, those vacancies are part of what we're doing is trying to reach out to some of the youth group heads to see if there's some interest from that level to help support, because usually they're in that same age group.
Any other questions on personnel items? Okay, all those in favor of approving the personnel items listed here this evening? Motion carries 9-0. Curriculum and programs, Dr. Katona.
Okay, good evening. This evening, we're seeking your approval for the agreement with Montgomery County Community College and Methacton High School to participate in a dual credit program as defined in the document. And there are no changes in this MOU from previous years.
Thank you for that clarification.
Dr. Katona, I know you were unfortunately not available to be with us at the work session, but there was some other requests for other metrics that we might have associated with this program. At least I know in our last conversation, you were working to try to gather some of that. I don't know if there's anything you can share this evening, or is that something you're able to report to the board at a later date?
I have some information this evening. If there's anything else you need, you can let me know. This is, we've been doing the dual enrollment here for 8 years, and the courses are basically identified through student interest and selection. We have two of the courses, or one of the courses taught by two of our staff members. Chemistry is taught by Jill Palmer and Bruce Outland, and then the other courses that we offer are generally taught by Montgomery County Community College staff. The DE classes are weighted the same as honors classes at 1.1, and again, we do this, in part to offer more opportunity for students. Certainly now with the heavy emphasis on college and career readiness, this is another piece that we have that is looked upon very favorably. And for our students, the benefit that they could potentially get from this is to get that college credit. Perhaps have one less course to pay for. Not all credits are necessarily going to be accepted, and everybody understands that going into it, but certainly if they request, if they're looking at another community college to enroll in, more than likely they would take that credit. We have 143 students scheduled for courses, for 4 courses this year. That's chemistry, macroeconomics, microeconomics, and introduction to education. Last year we had 154 students over 6 courses, which included the 4 that I just mentioned, plus Ed Psych and Chinese. And I did specifically inquire about the Chinese because I know that sometimes today that seems to be very much a choice, for students. And we basically had no primary requests for elementary Chinese this year. So that one, is not running. But from year to year, I got information back to 2013-14, and over the years, the courses that we offer fluctuate anywhere from 3 courses to 6 courses, again, depending upon the interest. And looking at the number of students that have been involved over the course of the years, it appears that the numbers correspond very evenly with the number of courses offered. That is, the higher number of courses, we may have 20 more students than, when we offer 4 courses. This year, we actually have, our number this year is actually comes out a little bit higher overall than it was last year, but we seem to hold steady. We had 84 in chemistry last year, and we have 84 going into chemistry again this year. And then macro and microeconomics are very popular. And we generally go from high 20s into mid 30s with that one, and microeconomics in the high teens. So those are the 3 that seem to remain steady.
Thank you, Dr. Katona. That's very, very helpful to have that information. So can I have a motion to approve the dual credit program with Montgomery County Community College and Methacton High School as presented? Ms. Reese, can I have a second? Mr. Earnshaw, any comments from the board? Seeing none, all those in favor? The motion carries 9-0. Under policy, we have four policies with one policy being eliminated for second reading. Dr. Zerbe?
Yes, as presented, are there any questions on the policies? And just for the board's, just for a note for the board, it's my recommendation while there was public comment on policy regarding weapons, that we move forward past this policy, and I can certainly share with the policy committee chair whether or not we ought to look at any additional language associated with that, and if so, we'll put it on a future agenda and we'll deal with it if necessary.
May I have a motion to approve the second reading policies as presented here? Ms. Hull, is there a second? Mr. Winters, any comments from the board? Ms. Hull, yes.
I just want to clarify that this policy 218.1, our 200 category policies normally are relating to pupils. We also have a ban on weapons in policy 707, use of facilities, and 904, public attendance at school events.
Thank you for that clarification, Ms. Hull. Any other comments on these policies? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the policies as presented? The motion carries 9-0. For other, Dr. Zerbe.
Thank you. We have two items under gifts, donations, and sponsorships. So this evening, we're asking you to accept the donation from the Methacton Education Foundation for the fulfillment of a grant to the Methacton School District to fund the purchase of loaner music instruments for economically disadvantaged students at Skyview Upper Elementary School. The gift of value of $1,100. The second item, it's my pleasure to bring before the board, as I briefly mentioned at the work session, but we were able to finalize the terms of an agreement whereby Conacelli Motors of Conshohocken and the Methacton School District can enter into an agreement for the right for Conacelli Motors to place a sign on the auxiliary athletic field scoreboard for a period of 10 years in exchange for a donation, a monetary donation, a one-time monetary donation of $25,000. Attached to this particular agenda item is the agreement, the exhibit showing the location, and just for the board's additional information, I do have some additional photos of how the sign might look on the scoreboard. It's not actually affixed to the exhibit, but it is another picture that may be helpful for you. And that's all we have under gifts, donations, and sponsorships. There are no trips. There are three items under transportation. That is to approve the list of third-party transportation vendors as attached, approve the first student employee roster as attached, and to approve the bus stops as previously provided to the board. We did not attach those for safety and security reasons, and we have checked with the solicitor. These are the three items under the code that we should have the board on an annual basis approve for us to move forward with. Are any questions on any of the items listed there? Oh, I'm sorry. And last item under other will be item 13D1, which will be approve the separation agreement and release by and among the Methacton School District, the Methacton Education Association, and Robert Rosado employee.
May I have a motion to accept the donation as presented? Ms. Reese. And a second, Mr. Navarrete. Any comments from the board? Seeing none, all those in favor? The motion carries 9-0. May I have a motion to accept an agreement of sponsorship between Conacelli Motors of Conshohocken and the Methacton School District as attached for the right to place a sign on the auxiliary athletic field scoreboard for 10 years in exchange for $25,000. Mr. Navarrete, can I have a second? Mr. Winters, any comments from the board? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion carries 9-0. May I have a motion to approve the transportation items 1 through 3 as presented here this evening? Mr. Ryan, is there a second? Ms. Drummond, Any comments from the board? All those in favor? Motion carries 9-0. And item D, may I have a motion to approve the separation agreement and release by and among the Methacton School District, the Methacton Education Association, and Robert Rosato employee? Mr. Winters, can I have a second? Ms. Drummond? Any comments from the board? All those in favor? The motion carries 9-0. Dates for board members' calendars. Looks like we have committees picking up work again in August. Our work session and board meeting, the end of August. Do we have any old business for this evening? Any new business? Moving right along. Courtesy of the floor. Dr. Malik.
Jim Malik, Worcester. The residents of Shenandoah appealed their assessments. $4 million was put into an escrow account. If the district prevails, what plan does the board have to return that money to the taxpayers, including those paying outrageous college tuitions, the taxpayers of Shenandoah, and those on fixed incomes to help them pay for prescription drugs and other expenses?
Dr. Malik, I'm not prepared to answer your questions at this time, so you may as well proceed.
I asked about Mr. Winters in that last item. What was that last item?
I was going to talk about the EITC and the OSTC. I will...
That's okay.
No. You asked...
No. It's on my time. I don't need to know.
Okay.
I can pause your time, Dr. Malik. If
No, that's okay. That's okay. Because it's getting late. Have you guys heard about the federal funding formula? Because my question is, has anybody from the district been contacted by the Wagner campaign recently regarding Governor Wolf's fair funding formula and how Methacton was going to get a cut in state funding of $1.9 million? Dr. Zerbe?
Questions should be directed at me, and we're not prepared to answer that at this time.
Did the Wagner campaign want to do a town hall here at Methacton regarding this issue? I heard they spoke to Dr. Zerbe. Talks are productive, and the board nixed the idea. Is that true? And I didn't hear from Dr. Zerbe. You got to understand, I'm a Republican committee man who has ties to Wagner. I heard it from a good source. Why'd you turn Wagner down? Can you tell me? Wagner wanted to come here to Methacton, and he got turned down because we're going to get cut $1.9 million. When were you guys going to tell the public?
Dr. Malik, do you have anything else?
It's my time. I'll sit and look at you like you look at me. That's your new strategy, I'll do it too. Why weren't you going to tell the public? How about a little transparency from the board?
It's about that time, Dr. Malik. Anyone else for courtesy of the floor? Mr. Andrews.
John Andrews, Lower Providence. I find that number of 1.9 million, which Methacton would lose if the fair funding formula were to replace the hold harmless provisions in the state subsidy of basic education. There's a lot of students across the Commonwealth, I don't know, 500,000, 900,000, whatever the number is. And the hold harmless provision is unfair in a number of ways. It doesn't account for changes in student enrollment, for instance, among other things. So I think that the districts that are getting more than their fair share, such as Methacton, would give the legislature some emphasis to act if, let's say, over a 4-year period, we were to the first year, let's say, send back $500,000 of that. The second year, send back $1 million of it. The third year, send back $1.5 million. The fourth year, send back $1.9 million. I think that's would be a decent acknowledgement of our responsibility to spend Commonwealth funds. So I don't think it's a matter to be brushed aside. I think it's a civic responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Anyone else for courtesy of the floor? May I have a motion to adjourn? Ms. Drummond, is there a second? Mr. Ryan, meeting is adjourned.